Have you ever paused long enough to wonder what God could do with a life that finally stops resisting? Not a famous life, not a polished one, not a life that has everything figured out, just a life that quietly says, I'm yours. If your faith has felt tired lately, if the fire you once carried feels smaller now, if you've been doing all the right things, but your heart still feels heavy, this story is not here to impress you. It's here to sit with you. So take a slow breath. Let your shoulders soften. Let the noise of the day loosen its grip. For the next few minutes, you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to be strong. Tonight, we are not talking about greatness. We are talking about surrender. There is a man history remembers, not because he was talented, not because he was educated, not because he was impressive in the eyes of the world, but because he was available. Before crowds gathered, before his name crossed oceans, before revival followed wherever he went, his journey began in obscurity, in limitation, in quiet obedience. And maybe that's why his story still speaks, because deep down, many of us are not asking to be great. We are asking to be used without losing our souls. We are asking if God can still work through ordinary people, with ordinary fears and unfinished faith. This is not a story about a man who had it all. This is a story about a man who finally let go. And as you listen, I want you to hold one gentle question in your heart. What might God do if you stopped holding back? We won't rush this story. There's no need to hurry. Some truths only rise when we slow down enough to hear them. And this one was born in silence. The first surrender, telling the truth about yourself. Most people think surrender begins with action, with bold decisions, with visible change, but it doesn't. Surrender begins with honesty. Honesty about who we are and who we are not. Dwight Moody did not begin his life with anything that looked impressive. He did not grow up surrounded by opportunity. He did not carry polished words or formal education. He did not walk into rooms and command respect. If anything, his life began marked by lack. Lack of security, lack of certainty, lack of control. And yet this was not a disadvantage. It was the soil where surrender first took root. You see, when you know you are not enough, you stop pretending that you are. You stop building a version of yourself designed to impress others. You stop hiding behind confidence you don't truly feel. And something quiet happens inside. You become available. I've noticed something over the years, and perhaps you've noticed it too. Many people do not lack desire. They do not lack passion. They do not even lack faith. What they lack is permission. Permission to be unfinished. Permission to be weak. Permission to need God instead of managing appearances. Moody did not offer God his strength. He did not come with credentials or carefully prepared ability. He offered God his emptiness. And emptiness is not a flaw. Emptiness is a sacred space when it is surrendered. Because God has never been limited by what we lack. He has only been limited by what we refuse to release. Perhaps the first surrender in your life is not about doing more. Perhaps it is about admitting the truth, that you don't have it all together, that you don't always feel strong, that your faith at times feels thin, and instead of hiding that truth, you place it gently into God's hands. This is where real transformation begins, not when we impress heaven, but when we finally stop pretending we can do life on our own. The small moment that changed everything. History rarely turns in loud moments. It doesn't always shift with applause or crowds or perfectly planned events. More often, history bends in quiet places, in moments so small they almost go unnoticed. For Dwight Moody, everything changed. Not on a stage, not in a church filled with people, but in the ordinary rhythm of a workday. A shoe store, wooden shelves, dust on the floor, hands busy with routine tasks, and one man who almost didn't walk in. He wasn't a preacher. He wasn't confident. He wasn't even sure he would say the right words. His heart was pounding. His courage felt thin, but love pushed him forward. He placed a hand on a young man's shoulder and spoke a sentence that would echo through generations. No polished theology, no dramatic delivery, just truth, spoken with trembling sincerity. And then, silence. No instant reaction, no visible miracle, just a heart-absorbing words it had never fully believed before. That is how God often moves, not through force, but through presence, not through pressure, but through nearness. And maybe this is the moment you needed to hear about tonight, because you might be waiting for something big, something unmistakable, something overwhelming, but God may already be whispering in the middle of your ordinary days. I often wonder how many turning points in history looked insignificant at the time. A conversation almost avoided, a sentence nearly left unspoken, a moment that felt too small to matter, and yet that small moment became the doorway. Here's the truth we don't always like to face. God doesn't need our confidence. He needs our willingness. He doesn't wait for perfect timing. He works through surrendered timing. What if the moment you're tempted to dismiss as nothing special is the very place God intends to begin something eternal? Pause here for a second, because this question isn't really about Moody, it's about you. What is the small obedience you've been postponing? What is the quiet nudge you keep pushing aside because it feels too simple, too unimpressive, too ordinary? History does not always begin with crowds. Sometimes it begins with one honest sentence spoken in love. Daily obedience, when no one is watching. After the small moment comes a long road. This is the part few people romanticize, because surrender is not only a decision, it is a daily posture. It is waking up and choosing faith when feelings are quiet. It is showing up when no one applauds. It is staying faithful when progress feels slow. Dwight Moody did not step into influence overnight. There were no crowds waiting, no recognition, no sense that history was unfolding. There were only ordinary days, days of serving people who had little to give back, days of speaking to those who barely listened, days when doubt whispered, "Does this even matter?" And this is where many people stop, not because they don't love God, but because they grow tired of obedience that feels invisible. I've learned something important about faith. God often builds depth long before he builds reach. He forms character before he grants influence. If we skip this season, the public moment collapses under its own weight. Moody embraced this hidden season. He did not measure success by numbers or attention. He measured it by faithfulness. And that kind of obedience changes something inside a person. It strips away ego. It exposes motive. It teaches dependence. Perhaps the reason your life feels quiet right now is not because God is absent. Perhaps it is because he is doing something deeper than you can currently see. This is not punishment. It is preparation. And preparation rarely feels exciting while it is happening, but it shapes the soul in ways applause never could. So if you are serving quietly, loving faithfully, praying without visible results, do not underestimate this season. The roots are growing, and what grows underground often determines what can stand above ground. The third surrender, when you are misunderstood. There is a moment in every surrendered life that no one prepares you for. The moment when obedience is no longer hidden, but it is still not celebrated. This is where misunderstanding begins. As Dwight Moody's influence slowly grew, so did the voices around him. Some were curious, some were cautious, and some were openly critical. They said his words were too simple, his grammar too rough, his style too unrefined for serious spiritual work. They didn't deny that people were responding. They questioned how it was happening. And this is a painful place to stand. When God is clearly at work, but people still doubt your legitimacy. When fruit is visible, but approval is withheld. When obedience costs you reputation. This is where the third surrender is required. The surrender of needing to be understood. Moody could have changed himself. He could have polished his language. He could have chased acceptance from religious leaders of his time. Instead, he made a quiet decision. He chose clarity over admiration, faithfulness over refinement, truth over approval. There is a strange freedom that comes when you stop needing everyone to agree with you. And perhaps this is the place God is gently leading you now. Not away from people, but away from the hunger to be validated by them. Because the desire to be accepted can quietly become a chain. And surrender often looks like laying that chain down. I want to pause here for a moment because this question may touch something tender. Where have you been holding back because you are afraid of being misunderstood? Where have you softened obedience to avoid criticism? Where have you stayed silent because clarity might cost you comfort? God does not measure faithfulness the way people do. He does not ask whether everyone understands your calling. He asks whether you trust Him enough to walk it out anyway. And when that surrender is made, something deep settles into the soul. A quiet confidence, a steady peace. Not because opposition disappears, but because approval is no longer the source of strength. This is the moment when surrender becomes unshakable. Legacy, letting go, and the quiet invitation. In time, Dwight Moody's life touched more people than he ever set out to reach. Not because he chased influence, not because he pursued recognition, but because surrender reshaped everything he touched. Crowds came, doors opened, opportunities multiplied, yet something remarkable remained unchanged. He never stopped being a man who knelt before he spoke. He never stopped believing that prayer mattered more than applause. He never stopped pointing away from himself. Even as his voice carried farther, his grip on the spotlight loosened. That perhaps is the clearest sign of a surrendered life. Not how high it rises, but how lightly it holds success. As the years passed, Moody understood something most people learn too late. He would not be here forever, and the work of God could not rest on one name, one voice, one lifetime. So instead of building a monument to himself, he invested in people. He poured into others quietly, faithfully, without needing credit, because surrender does not try to last forever. It tries to multiply, and that decision changed generations. Long after his voice fell silent, the echo of his obedience continued. Lives reshaped, callings awakened, faith passed from hand to hand, not because of charisma, but because of faithfulness. Near the end of his life, his body weakened. His strength faded, but his peace did not. Those closest to him said there was no fear in his final days, no grasping, no regret, only a quiet certainty. A man who had let go of control long before the end found it easy to let go again. That is the hidden gift of surrender. When you release your life daily, you are not afraid to release it finally. And now, as this story comes to rest, I want to turn the focus gently back to you. Not with pressure, not with urgency, just honesty. You don't need a platform. You don't need perfect words. You don't need to become someone else. You only need to decide what you will keep holding on to and what you are willing to release. Because God has never asked for brilliance. He has never waited for perfection. He has always looked for one thing, a heart that says, without resistance, without bargaining, Yes. So take one more slow breath and ask yourself quietly, what might God do with a life that finally stops holding back? And what could change if tonight you chose to surrender again? Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. That is where the story always begins. Thank you for spending these moments with me. Thank you for listening with an open heart. If this story spoke to you in any quiet way, if it stirred something gentle inside, I invite you to respond, not out of pressure, but out of reflection. You can leave a comment below with just one word, yes, not for me, but as a quiet reminder to yourself. If this video brought you peace or helped you slow down for a moment, consider giving it a like. It helps this space reach others who may need it too. And if you'd like to walk together through more stories of faith, surrender, and quiet renewal, you're welcome to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for being here. May grace meet you gently wherever you are tonight.